All right, so we're going to start. So let's start with the basics. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us what you're up to lately? Okay, great. So hi everyone, great to be here. I'm Idan Ofrat. I'm a CTO and one of the co-founders at Fireblocks. For those of you who haven't heard about Fireblocks before, we are the world's largest digital asset infrastructure provider. Basically serve over 1,300 businesses worldwide, and what we give them is first and foremost wallet infrastructure, and then anything they want on top of it to build their Web3 services.
Hey everyone, my name is Tomer, product manager in the Web3 space, product manager on Celsius, leading the over-collateralized retail loan product. In my free time, I participate and a community member of many Web3 communities, you know, NFT-based communities, DAOs, and always push myself to play and test the most innovative and new concept of Web3.
And what else didn't you say? And Toma was a student in the Zell program, which I ran for many years. But now I'm a co-founder and COO of Horizon Labs. Horizon Labs is a crypto developer working on both infrastructure. We've created a zero-knowledge enabled network of blockchains. We have pilots with companies like Celsius. And we're also give advisory services for token launches, including the ApeCoin, which we launched just recently.
Thank you. Came right in time. So I'm Mark from Fuse, and the CEO of Fuse. We are a Web3 company, but we started 3 years ago and did something unfashionable, which is launching an L1. It was unfashionable back then. And we wanted to really take the playbook, the Ethereum playbook, and we didn't want to build an Ethereum killer. The idea is to take the playbook and build a Visa killer. So we believe that in the future, consumers won't be interacting with blockchains, you know, won't make decisions about which blockchain to use any more than today. You know, usually consumers don't choose to use Stripe. It's usually the merchant chooses it for them. So we believe that decentralized Stripe is badly needed, and this is what Fuse is building.
Perfect, thank you. I'll introduce myself. For those who don't know me, I'm Meirav. I was chosen in 2020 as one of the 100 most inspirational women in blockchain, and again chosen a few weeks ago as one of the 36 most inspirational women in blockchain in the world, in both cases. I've been in the space for over 5 years, doing 3 positions as COO in different companies, including in Bancor, which raised $153 million in a crowd sale. I advise regulators, banks, financial institutions, startups, and companies both in Israel and abroad about everything that has to do with moving ahead with the financial technology, not only crypto, but financial technology. Did I mention that I was the business development manager of Leumi Trade for 7 years? So I did that as well. And I'm actually here kind of honored to announce that you know, we get a lot of companies coming to get advice from us, and what we decided to do now is actually open an incubator with all the deal flow that we have and the investors that are backing us for everything that has to do with companies in the spaces of fintech, crypto, NFTs, and Web3, including metaverse. There are amazing metaverse projects around there right now that are happening. And I'm very honored to be here with you guys. And let's start from the basic, and I'd like to ask Idan, Web3, what is that in your perspective?
All right. So Web3, from my perspective, and I think many others share the same view on what Web3 is basically the next iteration of the web or the internet. And when you think about the internet today, the internet is a pretty decentralized system in the sense that anyone can tap into it. It's open. Anyone can transfer data on top of the internet between people and services. But there is one problem or one thing that I think that everyone here is aware of, that eventually data ownership on the internet is not very decentralized. It's eventually today managed by a very limited, a very small set of companies, big tech companies and financial institutions. And I don't think that many people care really about the fact that it's not very decentralized, and the fact that there are so little or so few companies that own your data, but eventually it holds innovation. And what happens today is that the services that serve you and process this data are also the same companies or same services that hold the data. And what Web3 does is actually to decouple between them. So what it allows people to do is to decide where the data is held and have other services that consume this data. So think about, for instance, today where you have all your social data on Facebook, you can't really have in an easy way every service just tap into this data and use it externally. What Web3 is going to do is interoperability. It's going to allow a lot of new services that some of them don't even exist today, and have them access your data, and you can decide whether you want to hold your data yourself or whether you want someone else to hold your data. And I think it's what's really exciting about it is that it's not just going to be a new set of services. I think it's what's going to happen is that it's going to be a new type of services that we can't even imagine. We don't know what we don't know, right? Like there are so many services that are going to be built in the next decade that we can't even imagine that is going to be built on top of this Web3 technology.
It's interesting that you're saying that people don't necessarily realize this, okay? But this is something that should be in the back of everybody's brain, that right now the biggest or most interesting piece of oil is actually the data that users generate. And right now there are a select few companies around the world that are utilizing this oil that we, each and every one of us, is creating. So Web3 is the point where I'd say companies and people come and say, wait a minute, why does this data not belong to us, right? So I guess the next question comes to you, Tomil, because this kind of like, I'd say, pulls the rug under the business models of the big tech, right? So what's the relationship, in your opinion, between the Web2 companies and the Web3 companies that are being created, and how is that going to pan out? Because, you know, it's an interest of all of us, but not necessarily of the big tech companies, right? And they're big.
Yeah, it's a great question that also can explain what it is Web3. So basically, how I see it is that Web3 will be the web of value and properties. Anything valuable for an end user should be stored on a decentralized network on Web3. And now the most common use case is coins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, any other cryptocurrencies. But what we're starting to see more and more is any other type of valuable properties stored on chain, on the web. So it can be content, valuable post you created, it can be art, a video, or even a community of followers. And right now, it's like in the concept of how internet works today, all that properties, all that valuable things that people create are stored on the centralized database of the big tech. So you build a community, and you think, okay, this is my community. I have now 20,000 people. It took me 4 or 5 years to build, but the entire thing sits on the database of Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or Telegram, and in one day they can shut you down. And this is like one of the problems Web3 is going to solve. And I believe more and more Web2 companies will understand that in order to be fair and attractive to users, they should allow the end users to create and truly own these properties on Web3 and not on their centralized database. So Web2 gonna be the front end, all the information, but the content itself and anything that the end user create and it's valuable will sit on decentralized network.
All right, thank you so much. Liat, the next question is for you, okay? So we're saying that Web3 is a work in progress, right? And we understand that there are limitations, and I'm gonna ask you later, Tomil, about how you think this is gonna pan out, because this is worth discussing. But I first wanted to ask you, where do you think we're gonna be seeing the first achievement of Web3 working, okay, with everything that Tomo spoke about, that it's not that easy. What do you think is going to be working first?
Well, I think we're seeing the kind of little sparks of it right now. And I do agree completely with what was said by my panelists before. We don't know how it's going to pan out, and there are so many different ways, and some of the things that everyone is hopeful for may actually also not pan out as much, because I don't think anyone imagined that Web 2 would be so centralized in such a decentralized place. So, but I think what's really a gateway is what we're seeing now, whether it's metaverse projects that are connecting between gateways to more immersive gaming, more interactive, more peer-to-peer plays. So we're seeing already starts of it, and it does make sense that gaming and entertainment will be a place that is a start, because it's a much easier access point. People in gaming have already been used to a lot of the things that are kind of the gateways. So I do see that as the obvious start, and just from looking at the projects that are coming to Horizon Labs right now, it seems that fashion, music, and gaming are going to be those kind of gateway platforms.
And mostly on the metaverse, just like you said, that's like the first place that we're going to be seeing this. So I guess the next question for you, Mark, is do you think it all has to do with the metaverse, or is that where we're going to be seeing the changes, or is it going to be on other kind of products and other kind of platforms? What do you think?
So I think, first of all, the metaverse is like in Web3 and blockchain is a bit of a problem to describe, something specific, because it's not specific. It's like a marketplace of ideas, and suddenly those ideas have a moving price, some of them, and of course, if you remove the speculative part, there's very little Web3, real usage in Web3, and some good examples that we can say, oh, that's Web3, there's a consensus on this. There's a couple of examples, like when we're using any decentralized service, in the end it's hosted on Amazon. That's one problem. But the problem is like bigger, because you're basically using the SaaS model pretty much for everything in the world, and Web3 allows you to create new models. And I think the real innovation here is not consumer-facing at all, no metaverse, no blockchain-related. It's this idea that machines can interact. And if I want to store something, I can go to a network that works on storage and rent services from them.
Wait, you're saying Web3 is not going to be
consumer-facing?
Consumer-facing? You're going to think it's going to be in the back end?
At the near term, it's absolutely not consumer-facing. People that are developers, investors, degens, get their hands dirty. That's not how it's supposed to be. Consumers don't know how to own their own data any more than they can be their own bank. It's maybe something that sounds nice, but turning it into reality.
I'm seeing our partners here kind of like nodding with their head.
No, but again, it's idea. Those ideas is something people can connect, but we're talking about actual usage. When we're looking at things like the graph, for instance, where I'm renting or buying data from a decentralized network with crypto, and the way I pay for it is I write a contract that in real time goes and buys this data. Or if I have a DDoS problem, and instead of going to Cloudflare, I go to a network that provides the service of DDoS protection. Or if I want storage, I go to a network that does storage. And there's like specialized networks that are not run by Amazon, not stored on Amazon, that the operators have like a way to monetize their activity. Yeah. Those operators are not in the metaverse. They're running infrastructure. There's a business model there.
That's very interesting what you're saying. It's like you're seeing two sides of it.
I don't think it's two sides of it. It's like we're talking about big ideas. We're talking about consumers, and this is just not about consumers right now. It's about investment in new, innovative business models.
But do you agree that the first examples that we're going to be seeing with Web3 is actually what we're seeing with gaming and I'd say metaverse and presence there, or do you see it happening in the back end?
Gaming is also not about Web3. Gaming is all about the fact that somebody in the Philippines was able to play a game and withdraw it to Philippine peso. It's not about NFTs. It's ideas in general are about NFTs. But
I think you guys are eager to answer, right? What do you guys think?
No, so I agree with pretty much everything that has been said. I think that there is going to be things that are not even consumer facing, as you said, that eventually are going to be between businesses and businesses. And there are also going to be, I believe, in the next 2 or 3 years, new use cases that are going to be massively adopted. I think that there is a question of what we define as massive adoption. If we expect in the next 2 or 3 years to see 5 billion people on Earth consuming services that are purely Web3 centric, it's probably not going to happen. But I think that if we talk about something a bit more humble, like the first hundreds of millions of people consuming Web3 related services, this is definitely going to happen. And I don't think that it's going to happen just by one thing. There are going to be this gradual process of different types of services. One of them, I believe, is gaming. Gaming is going to be, I think, one of the next frontiers, at least consumer-facing. I think that the other one is around music. And I think that also payments. Eventually, payments is today very centralized. And I think that the convergence of payments, gaming, and other use cases is going to be that. And as I said before, if we look a bit further to the next 5 to 10 years, I think that it's going to be a completely new set of services that are not using even the terms that we use today to describe services on the internet.
And just, can I just add, sure. I think the distinction too is not so much about whether it's going to be consumer or not. Just like internet, there are many layers, so consumers will be interacting. They won't necessarily need to understand the technology behind it. They won't even need to... Exactly. Well, I mean, there probably will be some nuanced differences, but certainly from a consumer point of view, just like I don't understand how an email gets sent, I won't understand that there's a blockchain backend to something that I'm doing. But I just think there's a lot of layers. But I do agree with you that ultimately the infrastructure layer is not a consumer usage.
Tomer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like I'm kind of agree, but definitely think that there is a huge opportunity now for people. For example, you can see what the new campaign of, forgot the name. Yeah, there is a new campaign of like a huge of the social network of Facebook with their Instagram, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, with Instagram.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's happened to me, but Instagram.
Okay.
I'm using
it's amount of
Instagram.
people. It's like it's the most embarrassing to get a
I guess
black
use
on.
TikTok more than Instagram.
Yeah,
it's like it's for the
But
boomers.
they're centralized, so it's okay to forget them.
Yeah. So Instagram, right? So now there is an option for people to upload their NFTs to Instagram. Instagram have 2 billion users. This is just the start. So I definitely see NFTs growing and Web3 growing.
But isn't it kind of like counterproductive? If you're buying an NFT and it's decentralized, and then you're putting it on a centralized platform like Instagram, how do you see that panning out?
Yeah, so I did not use it actually, but I don't know how exactly you can share it on Instagram, but still it's yours, and maybe you need to prove with signing a transaction that you are the owner of that NFT, and only then you can share it. Same like it with how it goes with Twitter. But
this is interesting because one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is how big tech are going to be dealing with this, and what you're showing us right now is that how, instead of competing against them, let's join them.
Exactly. So this is something important. There is a huge shift on how big tech are thinking about blockchain. So you could see what Facebook tried to do around 2019. Their approach was like, okay, it's a cool idea, but we will create our own coin. we'll create our own chain.
Let's be centralized.
Yeah.
More centralized.
Yeah, let's use the blockchain trend to get more data and more control over the internet. And this is why they tried to do, but then they failed. And now...
They failed because another centralized entity stopped them, which were the governments that went forward and created central bank digital currencies. Let's look a little bit.
The entire governments of the world just fought this idea, and it was like basically collapsed and failed. And now they understand that they cannot hijack the idea and not need to compete with everything, but they should get involved. And what they did, they actually allow people to post their own NFT in Instagram, NFTs that sits on Ethereum and Polygon, and soon also on Flow, I believe, and another few chains. So they not anymore think they will they understand they not need to be the layer of ownership or the blockchain layer, but they need to be the front end.
The front end,
I just want to add something small about the big tech companies. I think something really changed in the last 6 months.
What do you see?
I think until last year, until January, I would say, when stock markets were at all-time high, the potential was limitless. And it's just like something
You mean the big tech
the potential of technology,
of them.
the potential for earnings, the potential for their stock price, the potential in general of adoption and usage, and something in this image broke completely, did a U-turn. I'm not talking only about regulatory stress, but also stress from the investors. But most importantly, it's not cool anymore. To use Facebook.
I think it's coming from the ground up.
Maybe, yeah, from the users.
I
this
think
is
that
important
there was a lot
because,
of anger about the centralized entities, especially around Twitter.
Because for the big brands and like NFT, most of those brands, the platform was the distribution platform was Ethereum or OpenSea. So if crypto can be a distribution platform more powerful than Instagram, and I think we're around the corner, it's already DeFi is already the America's 30th largest bank by assets. So this could scale to a point where it's no longer it's not competition. They can actually acquire users from other platforms this way.
But do you think they realize that the model is changing? That they're acquiring users, they're bringing things into their platforms, but they're still centralized. The data is still with them.
Yeah, but I think. Sorry, I'm talking too much. I'll just answer quick. I think that the business model, if somebody would tell me that the biggest companies in the world would make money from advertising, I would not from electric green energy, not something that helps the world. I think we're in a intermediate phase where we found something that we know works really well for monetizing the internet. But
but it's not distributed properly.
But it's not about centralization.
Exactly.
It's still those things will be centralized to some extent, but changing the power between the creators and the platforms. That's really what it is about.
So I guess that kind of brings us to the next question to Liat about who do you think are going to be the winners and the losers in this process? Right now we're in the intermediary stage, or actually I'd say we're at the beginning of the stage. Okay, I'm not even sure that the tech giants are realizing that decentralization is the next generation of internet. Okay, maybe they're just seeing, okay, we're kind of seeing a little bit of our stocks falling, we're seeing a little bit of people being upset, but I don't think they're seeing 2, 3, 10 years forward what we guys are what we're talking about here, that the data is going to be owned by the people. I'm not sure they're there. So how do you see that, Liat?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're not there. So I think it would be, I clearly do not have prophetic enough skills to be able to say who the winners and losers are in terms of names. What I can say is the winners are going to be those companies that adapt to a changing reality and to a changing business model that we'll have to develop, that we don't even know what it will be. Just like, in 95, even 98, even 2004, it wasn't clear what the business model would be for the internet. So I do believe there will be a different business model. There will be losers, mostly those companies that fail to see the changing tides and stick to to their guns. And the opportunity will be for anyone agile enough and bold enough to be able to try to, and creative enough to see how we can tap into it. So,
but I'm not clear about this, and maybe Idan, I know you want to say something. Yeah. So maybe I'll ask that question. But I guess the next question after you say what you wanted to say would be, how do you think this could pan out? Like, how is the power going to be taken away from these tech giants that have all this centralized data? Because we said it's not going to necessarily come from the customers and that realize that they could be the owners of data and start telling Facebook that. How could this, it's like a giants as opposed to many, many people, but they're not connected to each other in any way, and any new entrant into the market that wants to create a solution that could compete with the centralized entities would need to put so much money into marketing and explanation to people that, hey, you guys are giving your data for free, why don't you use it? Maybe you could be getting a salary just from watching Netflix, okay? And people don't realize that. So how do you think this could pan out? What are the stages that this kind of shift is going to be happening?
Yeah, so I think that what we need to realize is that going back to the question or who the losers and who the winners are going to be, I think that any company, as Liat said, that is not going to adopt to this change, that is not going to acknowledge that it's already there, is eventually going to lose. And I think that there is a question of what the driver of this movement is. And the driver is not necessarily the users themselves. It's the thousands of the services that are not the big tech companies that are now building the next generation of services. And eventually, if the big tech companies are not going to adapt and are not going to see what right now is happening, some of it really under stealth, they are going to stay behind. I think that eventually what's going to happen is that some of these companies will manage to make this change. Definitely some of the data is going to be taken out of their hands into the hands of the users or into the hands of other services. And going back also to the question around like Web 2 versus Web 3, not everything is going to be Web 3. Eventually there is a case where Web 2 or centralized data makes sense, where in some cases decentralizing data has a cost. I mean, eventually it's something that is less cost effective than centralized data processing. And some of the data that is held today in a centralized way is still going to be centralized. But I think that eventually many services or all services will need to adapt both their product and also the business model. Companies like Facebook that today most of their revenues come from advertising will probably not be able to do it in the long run. They will need to find another way to monetize their services once the data will be taken out from their hands into other services or into the consumer's ownership.
This is interesting because you're saying that they're going to realize that this is happening because of the small companies that are giving services on a Web3 kind of platform. Theoretically, though, these big companies could crush the small startups and could buy them out and could do a million other things that could keep their power intact, because we are talking here about very big sums of money on business models that have been very lucrative. And not necessarily people are going to be giving up their oil, okay, or companies, these big companies. So I guess the next question for you, Tomer, would be, what is your, how do you see this panning out? What do you think, like, in this relation?
Yeah, so now something we see in like big tech Web 2 companies like Instagram, they just allowing a simple feature of reading the blockchain. What it means, they allow people to post their NFT on Instagram. That's it. It's a huge progress, and I think the next step gonna be write the blockchain. So basically it means they will allow to anyone basically go to a picture on Instagram and mint it to an NFT on a Polygon or Ethereum.
Do you think Facebook is going to do that?
Yes, for sure.
For sure? That's exciting.
Yeah. Maybe take a few months or a year, but this is going to be the next thing. They already have a feature that allow not anyone, but some thought leaders with a lot of followers to post their NFTs from the Polygon and Ethereum network, and this is like the two main things I believe big Web 2 companies are gonna do, at least not on the fintech side. So when it comes to fintech, which everybody know what are the popular use case, DeFi, of course, we also see interesting things from big tech and Web2 companies. For example, Robinhood just announced that they're gonna have a self-custody wallet integrated to DeFi application. Because they understand that if they will not go on that path, they can lose their entire client in like, you know, for this like small startup or very innovative new company in 1 year. So it's nice to see that the big companies entering to the fully decentralized space. And I believe so the change or the revolution gonna be from you know, from top to bottom. So this is the example
from top to bottom, not from bottom to bottom.
Both. From top to bottom, with Web2 companies slowly entering to the space, like Instagram and Robinhood and others. But of course, you know, when you speak about decentralized social network, you have things like Lens protocol that now allow you to create your own account on decentralized network and basically, you know, got like start to have a lot of followers. But then you are not basically have to stay on this network. You can migrate to any other network with your identity, with your followers, with your community. And this is something very special. And like the small startups or the young startups, they are taking it already like 2 steps ahead. The user experience is more complex. And this is why the adoption will be slower. But this is like how we're gonna see also like new things and adoption and brave things coming from bottom up.
Bottom up.
Yeah.
Bottom up is an important point, Liat, because this could affect customers not only from the Western world, but also from the developing world. Many people do not necessarily live in the Western world, and these new kind of solutions could affect them, right? Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a point to be made that, again, by analogy, if you look at the way that cell phones migrated a whole non-Western world into being able to, I don't know, forgo landlines. I think in that same way, we have an opportunity, you know, through
forgo banking and payment systems straight through the cell phones.
Possibly, that's one use case, and we can see even from, you know, play to earn passive income through banking or solving the unbanked needs. I think there are a lot of opportunities where this technology will play out. But going out to back to the infrastructure, and there's also something that needs to be taken into account between efficiency and cost, and where it's actually advantageous to be decentralized. And I think that there's still a lot to be played out to do that. But I think this is a huge opportunity for, you know, for a lot of people to be able to benefit from what up till now has been a much smaller minority.
You know, I don't know who wants to take this question, but, you know, there is another player here. Not just the big tech, not just the companies, and not just the customers. There are the regulators, okay? Who would like to expand about how you think the regulators are going to pan out with everything that's happening here?
So I think in the discussion about Web3 and discussion about metaverse and discussion about blockchain in general, the big tech and regulators are not like leading this. It's a hedge for them. Like for the Bank of Israel, for instance, to do a pilot on Ethereum for the maybe little chance that maybe Ethereum is the future. For like this is how they view it. They will play with it, but they won't say this is the future. It's a hedge. For Facebook, it's a hedge. Also, if I'm a creator, I don't have a lot of choice. You know, there's like I can count on one hand my choices as a creator to reach a global audience and to monetize my community and stuff like that. So I don't think we don't think we need to ask those groups, you know, what they think. They definitely didn't sense that Uber had any consumer demand until the consumers came and tell them. That's one thing. The other
so
thing,
you're thinking the regulators will be surprised?
The other thing, democratizing financial service is not always in the best interest of regulators.
Right.
Democratization is not really good if you're risk averse. This is why if you look at the Western world, most of places that have Visa have cash, paper cash. Most places that don't have Visa have mobile wallets. Because it's easier to, those ideas kind of come, like the regulators are actively trying to block democratization of financial assets because of risk. Same goes for, things that are metaverse related. When I put the VR of Facebook, it was really scary that Facebook can now see, what I see. Like, it's more than just, what I click.
This is something
it's like
that,
where
that
I
people
look
need.
at. Yeah. And this is their core competency. Like, I would ask them how to monetize, user behavior. There probably won't be any entity that knows better than them. I wouldn't ask them about metaverse. Like, they're not going to lead this. They're a player there. You
think the metaverse by Facebook is not going to be one of the big ones? Because it's something that a lot of people ask me.
We're in speculation. I don't know. Like, my feeling that no.
You don't think that? This is something that I get asked a lot when I give lectures. I teach at a few universities around Israel and abroad. And one of the questions that people are asking are like, wait, metaverse, Meta, Facebook is also a metaverse. So like, what's the difference? And I'm like, no, because there are centralized metaverses and there are decentralized metaverses.
I have just like a little thought that comes to my mind. Like, I'm a millennial, like kids that are Gen Z kids. They're not much
kids.
Younger than me, but I can't relate necessarily. They live in the metaverse. I can't use their products anymore. I don't know how to use Snapchat. I don't know how to use Discord.
TikTok. TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok. There's a learning curve, even for millennials. So think about, Facebook that tries to build a product, and they say, what are you talking about? We're already living in the metaverse, They're already there. They don't know what they're talking about at Facebook.
Liat, you wanted to say something about this?
Actually, going back to the regulators, so how will this pan out with regulators? I would love to hear, because I agree they're not going to lead, and I think even they're only marginally hedging. They're really sitting on the sideline and mostly, kind of stopping things and being risk averse and afraid of it. I wonder what is going to be that kind of opening gateway?
I can say that I was lecturing a few weeks ago to the Israeli Tax Authority about the metaverse and NFTs, okay? And I was teaching them, and they're very, very interested in these worlds. And I think that the challenge for the regulators, I work with many of them, the challenge could be how do we as centralized entities grasp the ideology and I'd say the evolution of humanity into a place where we're saying we're not little kids. It's good that we have a centralized entity, but please step a little bit back and let other players in this field, especially with everything that has to do with data. Okay? Again, because there are some that would say that the regulators fell asleep with everything that has to do with data, because if their position is to have been protecting the end users, like they're doing in all of the rest of things, the idea is to keep everything orderly, and they enabled in the last 20 years the development of mega giants that are actually kind of like hoarding and hogging the assets that should have belonged to each and every one of us. Okay, so the regulators do have to kind of like step up. But the question is, it's kind of like going against themselves, because they themselves are part of the centralized entities, and that's where their power comes from. I see that you guys are kind of like eager. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I think that we need to distinguish between the financial use cases of Web3, which is actually what there is mostly today, right? DeFi and blockchain transfers and all that, and maybe also NFTs, to the non-financial use cases, which I think that actually in the latter case, it's easier for the regulator to digest that, because it's not purely financial services. Things that are going to be on the metaverse are probably going to be less problematic for the regulators than what you see today, which is DeFi and so on. And I think that regulators today are in different positions or different stages of understanding what's going on. For instance, in the US, I think that the regulator is already, it's not just one regulator, but the regulating entities there are in a much more advanced stage than what we are familiar with here in Israel. So what we see there is actually that many of them already understand that it's going to be, And what now they're doing, which is actually similar to the big tech companies, is they understand that it's going to be there no matter what they're going to do. And now what they are trying to do is actually to catch up with that and try to see whether what they need to do is to adjust the regulation or just let it happen and that's it. And what we also see there is the shift towards self-regulation, where the regulators say, we don't understand this technology at all. We don't have any chance to really adjust the rules or the regulation to that. And what we're actually going to do is just give you guidelines. And the lobby of companies that is leading this change are going to be the ones that are going to self-regulate this movement.
Which could be dangerous in itself.
Yeah. I think it might be dangerous. I think that it's actually going to be it's going to be beneficial for everyone. For the companies that really understand what it is to regulate it, because as opposed to the big tech companies today that own the data and own everything, most of the companies that actually are doing that today are, first of all, it's much more companies than what you have today. It's not just 5 companies that regulate it. It's dozens of different companies of different types. And I think that eventually it's going to be beneficial for everyone to have more self-regulation than just waiting for the regulator to do it themselves.
Thank you.
I just want to add that all regulation is written in blood. Like all the big rules were written after like big crashes.
Oh yeah.
All the like securities laws, from the 20s, and even antitrust laws. If you look at Standard Oil, where all the things we're talking about monopolies, this is lessons learned from the Big Depression.
Exactly. And not only from the Big Depression. Look at all the regulations that came after the banking crisis in Israel. Look at all the regulations that came after 2008 and the subprime crisis.
I think in general,
that's when the regulators
it's not only risk averse. It's like if it doesn't broken, don't touch it. This
exactly. But the question is, what's going to trigger them regarding the big tech?
And with Web3, I think this is not on the radar yet to be regulated.
Because there isn't a crisis.
Yeah, but I think really this is a matter of waiting to the next crisis.
It's true, but also something important to understand. We're gonna see so much different use cases with NFT that even not need to be regulated. For example, the chef Yuval Ben Eria just released an NFT collection 3 days ago that if you hold it, you can go to a dinner with the chef. We're gonna see so much of these things very soon. Utilities
of NFTs, the next generation.
Yeah, many utilities that regulators don't need to be scared or regulated.
Liat has something to say about that.
I beg to differ only on, yes and no. To the extent that there is going to be more peer-to-peer interaction, then my partner, which is the State of Israel, we're partners, she gets a lot of what I get. She's going to want a piece of that pie. And it's going to be very hard in a decentralized, in what we're aspiring to, in that kind of a decentralized world. I think it's going to be hard to imagine that governments are going to sit by and hope that we self-regulate our taxes. It's true that it's going to be much easier to follow the dots, but I'm sure that that's what they're going to be spending a lot of energy doing.
I do agree, especially if there is a secondary cell, an open sea, and stuff like this, where this is where it becomes more tricky. But
until there is a decentralized open sea, then they're going to have a problem.
I think what we don't tell to the tax authority, we're also meeting with the tax authority, are also our partners, very good partners. They're the most advanced regulator, because there's a new thing we can tax now, and and they're okay with taking money from drug dealers. They're in the tax evasion business, not money laundering. So there's other entities for money laundering. That's true. If they could have a wallet on Metaverse and collect money in Ether from everybody, they would be happy.
That's
but
one of the things that they're...
What we don't tell them, and this is the problem, and this is why Bill Gates and Warren Buffett hate crypto, and this is a threat on the nation-state model, on tax collection in general. How do you collect a tax from a system that doesn't acknowledge borders? And so we're talking about the speculation and the future. But what we're actually saying is taxation is also a model that needs to be changed.
Of course. I hope they're not going to do it. I'm not going to even give the solution of how to do this, right? All right, we have 2 more minutes, and I like to do at the end of a panel's future looking. Okay, So we have even 1 minute and 53 seconds for each of us to give their best prediction about Web3 and put in advice for the developers here in the stage of where you would put your effort. That gives 20 seconds to each one of us, so go ahead.
And advice around, like for the developer audience,
Web3, where do you think this is going, and what should be the next thing that the audience should be doing regarding it?
Yeah. So first of all, go to Fireblocks website and see our new web, our new Web3 engine that we just launched for developers. This is my first advice. But really, try to be really creative with what you do, and try to think of new business models and new products. The other advice that I have is that right now, the services that we see on Web3 actually have a user experience that is not as great as what we see on Web2, and I think that one of the focus that all of you should do if you build Web3 services is to give a really good user experience and a really good use case. That's my tip.
Okay, Tomo.
So 2 advices. One, build tools for Web2 to join Web3. Read the blockchain, write the blockchain, help them, onboard them. I believe there is a lot of opportunities on building such tools. The other thing which I really like is decentralized social networks. I believe it should be decentralized. It can benefit a lot content creators, and I think it's a huge opportunity too.
First of all, before I start, I'm watching the Fireblocks row here, so
yeah,
shout out to Fireblocks.
How many tickets did you guys take?
I want a T-shirt. I kind of feel left out.
Yes,
here.
please.
I'm really, really optimistic. I think there's so much going to happen, but on the way, where a lot of things are going to get broken. There's a whole world of market that still needs to appreciate what the opportunities of decentralized. So, kind of patience and kind of forbearing. This is going to be a wild ride.
So, I agree with everything, but I also can add that try to take advice from developers on investment and investors on development with a grain of salt. Like there's too much ideology and technology that is connected at the core in crypto. And if you look at Google, Facebook, all those companies, they never sell technology. They sold the product, the usage. They innovated on UX. So I think in crypto right now, unlike 2017, is a good time to actually reach customers, build products, and really shorten the 0 to 1 time to market.
All right, so I'm going to thank you all and thank the audience. And let's meet at Web3, I guess, right? On the metaverse.